This webinar is about network documentation, sort of being able to find information about your network. And if you have questions, let me know. I'll talk a little about how you get data into our system to make life a little easier as far as managing your documentation and getting things up to date and so on and so forth. But from the standpoint of network documentation, what it is, what do you need, that kind of thing. That's ultimately really on you from the standpoint of what it is you want to document. Uh, if you ask me, network documentation, what's important to document? Well, it's whatever's causing you pain, right? Whether it's outside plant or inside plant, whether it's data center, rack and stack. I just want to do capacity planning better because we have, space limitations. I need to make sure we're really efficient from that standpoint, or maybe you have power issues or power concerns, making sure you're not going over power numbers, things like that. Or it could be simply, I just need a logical drawing, or I just want to do a discovery of my network and just have some drawing and documentation to refer back to. So I sort of understand what's out in the field, how things might be connected together. So netTerrain is the software that I have displayed on the screen here. The company is Graphical Networks. netTerrain is the software. So it can be used for network documentation. If you haven't really been doing any kind of documentation so far on your network, the uh, most folks are obviously concerned with how level of effort, right? How long is it going to take? How difficult will it be to document or create documentation? Well, hopefully you're going to automate it in some way as best you can, and that can come out in different ways, right? That can be anything from, like I mentioned, discovery, like SNMP, to Excel import sheets. If you have an import sheet you sort of standardize on and just have people fill that out when they go out in the field and do work. Or it might be an integration with another system, maybe ServiceNow or SolarWinds, things like that, that you might have. So we sort of take advantage of all those things. But from a network documentation standpoint, you want to document things, you want to see what your network looks like. You could do certainly different drawing types, anything from like a logical overview, where I might show a physical piece of equipment or a reference to a physical piece of equipment. In this case, across a map. These are all different university campuses, so all sort of interconnected back to one central location. More of a larger logical type drawing of how things are connected together. This type of drawing is the type of drawing you might automate from the standpoint of doing some sort of SNMP type discovery, because usually flat or logical, you know base drawings, um, depending on the tool. Like our tool, we do SNMP, and then you can sort of lay things out, and I'll show you an example of that here in a second. Layer one, layer two type drawing, you might create this a manually created drawing where I drag and drop objects onto a diagram and then start connect things together. And in some cases, maybe this is all the documentation you need. You just wanted to show some core routers, how they're connected together, maybe some failover things and basic ISP information, and that's great. And you keep it kind of simple and straightforward. So with netTerrain, you can really do you have lots of different options from that standpoint. From sort of data collection side of the house, again, when you want to get into more, I want to document the network. How do I automate it? Again, something like SNMP, where you set up a SNMP poll and go out and do a discovery. These are all discovered via SNMP. All these objects, these are from our lab environment here at Graphical Networks, and it shows you physical connections, object to object. In this case, it's not going to traverse your patch panels by any stretch. Those things you're going to have to put in because they're not discoverable. But we can take advantage of like CDP and LLDP information and other sort of routing data, bridge table data, ARP data, etc., where we can see, like I have here, connections and object to object, device to device, and so on. So that would have been collected and discovered. So it helps you automate, start to get into the automation side of the house where you set up a schedule to just go rescan your network, get new data. It automatically comes in a NetTerrain because you can configure and set all that up and start to take advantage of all that information. So, and then something like ServiceNow, SolarWinds, AWS, Azure, they're just data points. They're collection points. There's data out there. Let's take advantage of it. And you want data that's obviously a trusted source of data as well. I've got data in a database. I trust this data. We maintain it. We keep it up to date. However you do that, manually or automatically. Let's leverage that information. And with NetTerrain, there's lots of options for leveraging data, as I mentioned. So, but once you do have data, what can you do with it in NetTerrain? What kind of drawings? How does this help me answer questions? Well, one thing, of course, is just doing straight searching, right? I want to do a search for a particular switch or a cabinet or something along those lines. We index all our data in the network documentation. So if you do want to search for something, like my example, I'm just doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know if what it's really going to come back with. I think I have a cabinet that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so close enough. But it shows me what it is. It's a Dell 42U, and I can say, show on diagram, and it'll take me to it. So if I need to get to information quickly in my network documentation, I can do a search and have it go out and find the information. And unlike, sort of more tools you might use to do network documentation today, they might be not really all tied together, right? Our tool is a hierarchical. So you start at a high level, you work your way down to more and more detail. You determine the levels and layers and what data you bring in at data points. It's totally up to you. But you do have those sort of options, and the capability of searching across the whole project is always nice. And it kind of gets you to things pretty quickly, like in my case, to a cabinet elevation. But I'm going to just jump back up to the top level through my breadcrumb trail. I'll double click and sort of navigate down. So with your documentation, you may have a situation where you do have a lot of like backbone fibers or carrier fibers, and you want to know what that data is and where it's coming from. In this particular example, I'm using a map to represent multiple campuses across the state of Maryland. And again, they're all sort of tied back, like my logical drawing was showing, sort of tied back physically to my central point, in this case, University of Maryland, which I can then navigate into and actually see UMD campus and see, in my case, different all the different buildings and so on that are highlighted. So with your network documentation, it allows me to visually see, where are all these sort of objects on my map. And the objects, the buildings themselves, I mean, they're important, but they're really more containers than anything. But something like a manhole, so you know where the location of the manholes are, or you might need to go out and find a specific vault, something like that. Where is the vault? Well, I know the GPS coordinates, so I know where it's placed because I can go in and see the place of where it's at. If I jump into the vault, I can see inside the vault, and I can see that I have a splice case inside the vault that I can double click on. And there's a tray, and then if the tray is documented, does it have strands fused together? That's what this is showing you. So I have a strand connected to a strand, and then there's a splice between them. And if I'm looking at this going, okay, well, where does that connect? That's great. It's nice to see that I know that there's a strand being fused together, but what is that part of? What's the bigger picture? And that's where you get into a drawing like this, where this isn't really a drawing. This is sort of on demand, where I'm asking the system, hey, can you show me, sorry about that. Can you show me the full path end to end of the diagrams, right? So, and that's what's going to show you. Now, I need to sort of zoom in on that and see a little more detail of that information. So I can do that. I can zoom in. So this is just generated on the fly by me double clicking. So if I zoom in, I can see the ports. I can see the ports and the associated, in this case, card or patch panel. It's actually the patch panel. The patch panel has a fiber cable connected to it. This is a strand out of that fiber cable, right? So and then I can see the cabinet and the wiring closet and the floor and so on. So it shows me full physical hierarchy, versus physical path. It shows me all those sort of points, the things that are part of the connection, the conduit, the fiber cables, 24 strand. And again, all the devices that make up that path that I generated by simply double clicking on a link. It gave me the whole path and showed me that, this is the starting point, and that starting point's the engineering lab. It goes through the vault, it goes through the paint branch, goes through the manhole, CPB, and then it ends in the Brendan building, which is my primary campus building. So easy to generate, easy to get to information about your project and what it is you're trying to do. Now, that's outside plant, doing fiber end to end. You may not even care about outside plant. You may be like, you know what, I don't manage the fiber. It's not my department, so to speak. What I care about is more rack elevations. So I look at something like this and I see racks. These are our cabinets. So you don't really see the elevation yet. This is just representing the cabinet on the floor plan. The floor plan itself is just an uploaded background image that I could turn on and off. So I'll turn it back on so you can see the floor plan. But the cabinet itself, different colors, because I have different rack utilizations here. This has got 22 rack units available, which puts it in the 25 to 50% full range in this particular cabinet. This one's pretty much full because it's above 75% and so on. Which you'll see in just a second, the data itself was compromising that. But these are all cabinets, so they're just showing you, where the cabinets are, how they're connected together as far as, on the floor plan. But you can track other pieces of data, maybe you need to track a ladder or a fire extinguisher or a camera and so on. So you can do that. If I double click on the cabinet, it's going to show me the cabinet and the elevation of the cabinet, all the devices making up inside this cabinet. This is all the front side, and then you can put stuff on the back side. So depending on how you wanted to rack mount something, you can do that. This one's locked for moves, so I'd have to unlock it, and then I should be able to move it. So if this was actually on the back side, I could move this over and rack mount it into the back side. But you'll see that I have devices, switches, routers, etc., but also the PDU itself, so we can get into the PDU and so on. So if I double click, I can drill down and actually see the PDU and power and connections and that sort of thing. So totally, from the standpoint of network, again, sort of network documentation and so on, you can do that. So, but continuing on, I'm going to stop talking just for a second, stop my share also, just see if you had any sort of specific questions out there that I can answer. Feel free to use the chat, or you can raise your hand or hit the Q&A button. I think you can put anything in there that you want as far as if you do have questions, but I'll give you a break for a second from listening to me. But yeah, turn my do not disturb on as well, since things were popping up on me. All right, getting back to it. Again, it's kind of talking about data and information, like where data comes from in netTerrain, because obviously I'm, showing you a lot of the network documentation side of the house, right? Where you can get into obviously a lot of information and details, but sort of from a, I don't know if you call it a mapping standpoint, or getting the data sort of in the netTerrain and automating that. You can do a discovery, so you can definitely go back through and, if you want to grab information and you want to pull it back, then we can go in and do and set up a connector, like an SNMP connector, where you go in and pull data in. I'll show you an example of that through this tool here, the connector, the collector. It's actually really the same thing. One's in the GUI, one's sort of a standalone utility, but from the standpoint of trying to sort of map out your network, you would typically go through the process of, especially with respect to SNMP and discovery, you're to go in and do an IP address range or ranges, put in community strings, etc., and then go out and really just press a button and do a discovery. And it's going to find those devices on your network. And then once those devices are found, then you're going to get into the really discovery and getting that data pushed into netTerrain. So going back to a diagram, something like this is a discovered network. This is really our lab environment. But, if you have a network and you're like, well, I know I've got devices and so on out there that have SNMP enabled, you can go out and do a scan of the network and find, well, hopefully discover those devices if you have the right information about your SNMP credentials, and do that discovery and effectively bring that data back into netTerrain. So, and it's automatic, and you can set up a schedule and have it go out and do a discovery and things like that on a regular basis. The objects themselves typically will match to an OID in our catalog. If they don't, then you can do that. It's just something done through the collector, do a mapping of the device type in the collector, basically, from that standpoint. So you can do those things. But it all comes down to what it is that you're really looking to document in your environment. But once you have documented, then a utility like ours, a software like ours, will allow you not only to document it, but of course get information back out of the system. So you can understand where things are in your environment, whether it's in a rack elevation or just in a building, or just in a flat drawing like this, where you just show kind of everything and how it's interconnected. It's really up to you um, from that standpoint. So the once you do have data in the system, then it comes down to what are you going to do with that data? Well, obviously, I've shown you how you can sort of trace connection paths and do things like that. But also, you can get into doing things like reporting on information in the tool itself. On the left-hand side, you can see, like, it says devices 36, where you can click and it'll give you a list of all those devices that are in the diagram, device types, and so on. And you can always go back and say show on diagram, and it'll take you to that object and sort of highlight it and say, oh, here's the object that you chose from that list. And on the right hand side, you also have information as well. So you can see that there's two of the 2920s and one of the APC 7900s and so on, and those are all clickable. So it gives you sort of mini reports out of the system. I mean, one thing when you get into a documentation project, obviously you're doing documentation for a reason, so you define that reason. You say, well, I need to document my cabinet elevations. Why? Because we're trying to manage capacity and just plan for future projects where we're going to buy hardware or swap hardware, that type of thing. So you sort of define it, you create your documentation around that, and then what you can do from there, I can, print out my rack elevations. I can do searches and lookups for racks that have capacity and those types of things. So you sort of define all these things, but you want to make sure your system can give you the information and data back out once you do put information in. Then other ways besides sort of some of the built-in clickable links that will give you typically table views of data. You may also want to, of course, do things like reporting, where I can go up to my query builder tool and go to a specific report, do a maintenance report. That's a report I built through the query builder tool, and then I can submit that, and it'll give me a list of, oh, here's all the devices with a specific maintenance date, and I could do a search for that, or just sort this, or export it to Excel if I want to. So a lot of network documentation is not just, of course, creating it, hopefully automating it, but then using it in a way that's going to be beneficial, obviously, to what it is you're doing in your operations. Helping me solve a problem, of course, is important. Helping me do planning, and so on and so forth. So all those types of things. But when you get down to it, of course, you need to define what it is you want to document, and then determine how you're going to do that efficiently, or hopefully automatically. And then, of course, on the other side of that is keeping things up to date. How you're going to keep your documentation up to date so it doesn't expire or become stale, which at that point, obviously, a lot of folks aren't going to use it because it's not really that useful anymore. So that you just sort of build into a process. Again, hopefully you automate it in one way or another. So with that said, if there's any questions, I'll go check the board. I'll stop my share. But if there's anything you guys need out there, question wise, you have other, want to test things out, or you'd like to, demo the software further, just let us know. And there's certainly a lot of documentation and videos you can get into as well. Networkdocumentation.com is where we sort of store all those things. But I'd say that's about it for today. I certainly appreciate everybody's time on that. And like I said, any questions come up, or if you want to talk pricing or all those things, just reach out to sales, and they can definitely help you out. I'm going to put in the link, networkdocumentation.com. That's where you'll find some videos and most of our documentation as well.
Hey, Jason, I do have a question. S&P is the only way they can discover items using netTerrain, right? For our discovery.
For true, for true discovery, yes, it's SNMP based to do that discovery. If you're talking about, you know, um, discovering data through a connector, that's different, right? We have integrations with ServiceNow or SolarWinds or those types of tools, where you can just use that data and leverage the fact that they're already doing a discovery, like SolarWinds, right? SolarWinds is doing SNMP discovery, so we're just leveraging their data to bring into netTerrain, so you don't have to do SNMP with us. But that's really the primary way you do a discovery network these days is SNMP. So,
Okay, thanks.
yep. All right, everybody. I appreciate your time. I threw a couple things in the chat. Reach out to sales if you have any more questions or issues. You want a longer demo, you want to again demo the product, or talk pricing. I'd reach out to those folks first, and they can get you straight. So, again, everybody, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it, and have a great rest of the day.